Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, representing the News Forum here at the Canada Strong and Free Networking Conference. And we have another guest with us today who is on a very interesting panel, Michael Blanke. Please maybe describe yourself to our audience and what you were talking about.
For sure. Thanks, Tony, for having me. Pleased to be talking to you today. I've joined the conference today to talk about really private market solutions to the global march to decarbonize. And in particular, this is because I am CEO of a company that does post-combustion carbon capture. We own the technology, we develop the projects, we have all the financing to do so, and really what we talk about here is solving our decarbonization goals in a tangible way,
right?
Using scaling up, using what works best, which is always private companies, private investments in a market that's functional.
So how would you describe the market right now?
Well, actually, right now, we're the only company in the world currently building a post-combustion carbon capture and storage project. So it's not really much of a market.
Okay. So you've cornered the market.
As a part of the broader market really is the carbon market, of course. And in Canada, we have this carbon tax, which is escalating over the next 8 years from $50 to $170 per ton. So that kind of creates a market for negative carbon. And the niche that, of course, carbon capture plays is it's the most concrete way to physically reduce carbon that would be otherwise entering the atmosphere.
And is it recognized as a legit way to deal with carbon emissions?
100%. There are certain sort of idealistically minded individuals that believe carbon capture, especially carbon capture from combustion of fuels, is a extension to the life of fossil fuels,
right,
for example,
right,
or any real carbon-based combustion. Those people are thinking idealistically, probably not practically. We've seen that since the Kyoto Treaty 30 years ago this year, that the actual mix of fossil fuels in the global energy mix has remained, the market share has remained right around the same amount. 30 years, no change in fossil fuels supply of energy for the world.
Right.
So the notion that we can simply substitute fossil fuels out, replace them with renewables, is just not working.
Right.
I'm not quite sure how long the world will need to look at the data and recognize that the 30 years of policy hasn't worked. The only thing that really has worked in any country has been reducing the use of coal in favor of more efficient fuels.
So what do you see as your biggest impediment to rolling out this new technology?
Well, we're in the process of doing it right now. Like I said, the first project will be on stream in 2 months' time. And we actually raised $300 million from Brookfield. We announced that just about a month ago.
Fantastic.
And actually the fund chaired by Mark Carney, the Global Transition Fund. So
I've heard of him.
We're seeing, yes, Mark Carney, he's quite prominent these days in the world of carbon finance. So what we're seeing right now is that we actually are ready to do this right now. Mm-hmm. The only kind of limiting factor, and it's limiting insofar as if you want to do this for scale, you need to take away risk for the masses to start to move into the market, is to take away carbon price risk. Now, we all know the Liberal government is advocating for 50 to 170. Every year they have to actually march that up as policy. But to an investor, and in particular to lenders, carbon pricing is a very unsure thing. It's not a real commodity. It's actually a derivative market. And that derivative can be wiped out. It can go to zero with a stroke of a pen if there was a government change.
That is, if the government changes and they want to axe the tax.
Correct. So if you axe the tax, that incentive to the incentive to capture negative carbon with the derivative of carbon tons, that could go to zero. We know the Conservative government has a solution or an intention of creating an incentive, which Bill C-262 was going to do that.
Right.
Got killed last year in favor of an alternative approach. But the alternative approach is to use carbon tax as the incentive. And carbon tax is really an incentive to not emit or to not consume.
Right.
Whereas it's a terrible incentive to invest, and in particular to invest in investment in like infrastructure that has a 10-year payout. When you could see government change destroy the entire revenue stream with that change of policy.
So I guess that's my next question then. Is there a way to get your industry going that doesn't involve the vagaries of government changing hands?
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what we're here to talk about today, and what we're spending our time on the road most of the time these days talking to investors is we need to make sure that the policies that are built around incentivizing decarbonization are practical, not ideological. So practical, we can look to the states for an example of a really strong CCS incentive policy. They've got a policy called the 45Q. It's essentially a commercial promise to pay from the federal government to any carbon capture and storage developer. So for every ton you bury, and you can measure that actual burying of the carbon dioxide, for every ton you bury, you get a check. Well, I mean, it's tax equity. You get a tax credit, but it's essentially a check from the government of a predictable amount. Then that will not change. It's a proper commercial contract.
Gotcha.
Versus kind of this avoidance of tax, which is much more difficult to invest in.
So, what do you see as the next steps for you?
Well, our business is moving forward nicely. There's an incredible amount of demand to actually capture carbon, both from a policy perspective, both parties, as well as industry that actually emits. So emitters recognize that there is a massive tax liability coming at them increasingly every year.
Right.
So every emitter knows they will have to do something, but they're stuck.
Right.
So we actually have a technology that allows us to do this cheaper than early generation technologies. We're the first ones to build this type of project where you're combusting natural gas in an engine or a boiler and capturing that. We're doing what we're doing, and we're going to ramp up quickly. The next most important thing is to make sure we have that sort of line of sight, commercial type agreement, a promise to pay from the organization that wants the service, which is, of course, the government.
Right.
You make the investment, the revenue stream is certain, industry will flood in, and we'll accomplish our decarbonizing goals.
Well, Michael, I wish you every success with your company, and I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot more about it in the months and years to come.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Honored to be here.
How do government policies affect the price of milk?
How could City Hall cut your property taxes without impacting services?
How do carbon taxes affect gas prices?
How many patients die each year while waiting for surgery? SecondStreet.org is asking governments hard questions. We're telling the stories behind the numbers. We also post all the data we receive online so that you can see the results for yourself.
If you'd like to learn more about our think tank, please visit us at SecondStreet.org and sign up for our email updates.
As one of Canada's leading ETF providers, BMO ETFs have partnered with investors for over a decade, delivering insights and growth through core investments, innovation, responsible investing, and income solutions. Start today at bmo.com/ETF.
Johnny wanted to go back home. It was 1,000 kilometers away. They forced him to go to the Indian residential school. More than 150,000 of us children had to go. They wanted to change us.
Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name.
Hallowed be your name.
Thy kingdom come,
Thy kingdom come,
thy will be done.
Thy will be done.
Kill the Indian and the child. It's been called cultural genocide. I survived residential school. My brother Johnny did not.
Chani Wenjack was one of thousands of children who died due to Canada's residential school system. More than 80,000 survivors and their families still live with its legacy today.
It's about affordability for families. It's about ensuring businesses can prosper and making sure politicians listen to you. That's where the Canadian Taxpayers Federation comes in. The ones who stand up to tax and spend politicians and government-funded interest groups daily. Because when we stand together, we have power. So if you want lower taxes, less waste, and accountable government, you need to get involved. Join us at taxpayer.com.
Welcome to a special edition of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement. We're here at the Canada Strong and Free Networking Conference in Ottawa, and I have a special guest with us today, David Lefebvre. Welcome to the program.
Nice to meet you. Tell
the audience a little bit about yourself and some of the things that you've been concentrating on.
Well, that's interesting because in the middle of the pandemic,
I was working with the Canadian Restaurants Association, and then it was pretty hard in that sector.
There were not very many restaurants open during that period.
No, not very restaurants. Yeah. So that was problematic. So I was working with them, and then I decided that I gained enough experience to launch my own firm. Mm-hmm. So basically, Bouduel Public Affairs. What we do is that we represent English Canadian companies, association, and small and medium-sized government affairs firm for their needs in Quebec and in French at the federal level.
Excellent.
So it's important for us to build the bridges and to know people from elsewhere in the country, hence our presence here at the conference.
That's an interesting concept. So are you finding that English companies really, there's maybe some cultural barriers as well as language barriers that are affecting their ability to do business in Quebec?
Yes, definitely. I would say it's on 3 levels. Of course, the linguistic barrier and the cultural barriers are important, but there's also a political barrier that needs to be bridged to understand what goes on in Quebec and how to perform. And this is really a place where we can really be a good conduit for English Canadian companies that want to have the success that they deserve in Quebec.
So how would you characterize the political barrier? What are they up against?
Well, they're up against the fact that because of the language, it's quite difficult to get access to the right information, the right analysis that can lead to make good decisions. And the political barriers also is that, well, oftentimes they will see some people from Quebec that are working at the federal levels, whether they're liberals and conservatives, but they're operating at the federal level. Provincial game is quite different. It's a little bit like Ontario. The provincial game is different than the federal one. But because of the language, well, you have access to the media, you have access to the people and to broadcasts such as yours. But because of the French language, you need that extra cultural and political cultural conduit to be able to be a success, and we hope that we can help our clients with that.
So maybe tell our audience a little bit about your analysis of what is going on with the Quebec economy right now. What do you see as the potential challenges, but also the opportunities?
The Quebec economy, surprisingly over the last 4 to 5 years, including out of the pandemic, has been pretty resilient. One of the big problems right now in Quebec are labor shortages, which is something that was unheard of. I mean, I was born in 75, and public records of Statistics Canada have been there since 76. Lowest employment level since I was born. Mm-hmm. And Quebec is now lower than Ontario and the average of the country. So it is something that is quite significant, but there's some danger lurking, as when you have labor shortages, it's hard to maintain the lead in productivity and innovation. And government is quite cognizant of that. That's why they invest so much money into this, because they know that they have an aging population more than the rest of the country. So they understand it's a problem.
What about supply chain disruptions? Is that an issue in Quebec?
Well, Quebec has always performed a little bit better than some of the rest of the country, if only because of the St. Lawrence seaways. Quebec has quite a lot of supply chain dependency on vessel and boat travel, contrary to Ontario especially. So I wouldn't say everything is rosy, but Quebec has always been in a geographical advantage in terms of the supply chain.
And do you see some good evidence that innovators in Quebec are being successful and being supported appropriately?
Yes, and also on this front, the federal government, both when the Conservatives were in power, the Liberals, it's always been also a priority in Canada. But Quebec is really trying to invest a lot of money in innovation and also partnering with academia in order to develop new technologies. I have some clients in the mining sector, for example. It's absolutely crazy what they're able to integrate into their existing projects, and the new projects that are going to move forward are going to be completely different from your father's mining, for example. So I think this is something that's definitely important, because you don't have many more workers, so you need to increase productivity and to do it in a good way.
So you talked about mining. That's obviously a critical sector in Quebec. Talk a little bit about energy. What's going on with energy?
Well, energy, Quebec is, in the perception of Quebecers, it's a quasi-monopoly on hydroelectricity and electric. Though when you look at the by petajoule, the expenditure and the consumption of energy, it's half and half between oil and gas and half and half between oil and gas and hydro. There's definitely a tendency for Quebec and also government power to go with more hydro, especially now that some projects like the line to Massachusetts has been refused. So you will have more local supply. So then there's a big push for hydro, but there's no way it changes overnight, and oil and gas on the consumption level is definitely there to stay.
Well, I think this has been an interesting interview. David, I want to thank you. Learned a little bit about what's going on in Quebec right now, and I wish you well at the conference.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
For sure.
They were just kids from New Brunswick. Never even left the North Shore before. Dad trained them the best he could. But how could they possibly be prepared? This was the biggest operation the world had ever seen. He'd already served in the First World War, earned the right to stay home, raise his children. But how could he send those boys into battle and not be by their side? Many were killed that day. One was my father.
Major Archie McNaughton was 47 when he died on D-Day, the invasion that marked the beginning of the end of the Second World War.
I'm Nima Rajan, and this is the Forum Daily. Join us for our daily news program that brings you the biggest stories of the day from Canada and around the world. The Forum Daily gives you the facts on the issues that matter to Canadians to help you stay informed in an ever-changing world. Join me weekdays for the Forum Daily, 6 p.m., 7:30 p.m., 9 p.m., and 11 p.m. Eastern, right here on the News Forum Network.
At secondstreet.org, we ask governments uncomfortable questions, such as how many patients die each year while waiting for the government to provide surgery. We obtained government data that showed 1,480 patients died while waiting for surgery in 2018. The data also showed some patients' lives could have been saved if waiting lists had been shorter. Do you think governments should be required to proactively release this information to the public? If you agree, sign up for our email updates at secondstreet.org.
Your morning wake-up call on your smartphone, your coffee maker, making breakfast, your tablet or laptop. These daily products are part of our lives. The Canadian energy industry is a leader in finding solutions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and is leading the way in development that supports Indigenous investment, diversity, and inclusion. Oil and gas is produced across the globe. Why shouldn't it be Canadian?
Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm the host, Tony Clement, at the News Forum. We're here at the Canada Strong and Free Networking Conference on site. Lots of interesting people that we're talking to, including Stephen Taylor. Stephen, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Tony.
So, you're a tech guy. Big news. It sort of overshadowed everything for weeks there. Elon Musk and his play to purchase Twitter.
Yeah, he's not slowing down in his news-making.
He is not.
No,
it's been a constant stream. So tell us your initial reaction, and then give us your sense of where this has been playing out and how it's been playing out.
Well, I mean, I think it's exciting. I mean, Twitter's product offering has been, it's been strong recently, but I do think the platform's been due for a shakeup, especially with how people feel that they can engage on the platform. There's been this conversation about equal access to people of different political persuasions. So I think Elon Musk has identified an opportunity there to come in and shake up the conversation by what he says is creating a digital town square for everyone.
So, of course, there's been massive reaction to this,
yes,
especially from what we would call the left, or the progressive circles. A lot of tears and pearl clutching, probably to be expected. Elon Musk has been kind of poking the bear a little bit on some of these things, too. Is that part of just who he is, or is that a strategy, or what's going on there?
I think it puts to lie a bit of the line that everyone seems to, on occasion, be upset with how Twitter deals with its platform. Well, as we saw, there was really only big reaction from one side, and gnashing of teeth and clutching of pearls on one side. It's that side was very much entrenched, established, whereas the other side feels like they're coming in as disruptors, and I think that they see a champion in Elon Musk.
So there's a couple of societal things happening simultaneously. One is people who believe in more freedom of speech that is necessary. These platforms, although they're private sector entities, they are the public square in a lot of places. And I know how active you are on Twitter, and I guess Twitter Spaces they're offering there. So it has that aspect for society. At the same time, there's been this push against disinformation, against the foreign Russian bots on Twitter and these kinds of things. Europe just passed a new law requiring social media outlets to be more accountable, to remove disinformation and remove propaganda and so on. So how do we square this circle?
Yeah, well, that's a great question for Elon Musk. I mean, he's got the plan, the vision. Probably a smarter guy than I, but yeah, I mean, it is a very difficult thing to address, and I'm looking forward to seeing how Elon tackles it.
I think we're all trying to figure out how to get through this, and I want to make it clear, there's also harassment issues and all these other things that make Twitter seemingly a toxic space for some people. So again, how do you? I honestly don't have the answer, but you've got these two contrasting points of view.
Yes.
And maybe Elon Musk, who has said publicly that he'll abide by any laws.
Yeah. It's a great point for him. That is to say, Twitter follows the law of the country, and if you have a problem with how Twitter is as a platform, well, it's incumbent upon lawmakers and policymakers at a national level or a state level to make those changes. Twitter just operates within the parameters of what is possible because it is such an open town square. Right?
That's right.
But you do bring up a lot of good points about how do we deal with all of these uglier elements of the platform, and well, like I said, I'm looking forward to seeing what Elon proposes.
Well, I mean, one of his proposals was there'd be no anonymous sites. I was quite excited about that one, I gotta say.
Well, yeah, I mean, but on the other hand, sometimes anonymity is important for people in distressed democracies and places where, they do need that sort of whistleblower aspect, being able to speak out against governments which might, crush dissent even violently sometimes.
Yes, exactly. Well, it's a very interesting public policy debate. I'm glad to have your point of view on it, Stephen. Thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you.
For sure. Yeah.
Your morning wake-up call on your smartphone, your coffee maker, making breakfast, your tablet or laptop. These daily products are part of our lives. The Canadian energy industry is a leader in finding solutions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and is leading the way in development that supports Indigenous investment, diversity, and inclusion. Oil and gas is produced across the globe. Why shouldn't it be Canadian?
It's packed to the rafters in the Edmonton Arena. Everyone is feeling the pressure on the Grabs as they await the American champs. Here's the Cleveland favorite Knits now, and boy, do they look impressive.
Look at their uniforms. I bet you could sure run in smart shorts like those.
Not that. Look, world champs, my eye.
Grads, we don't play for glory. We play the game for the game's sake. So tonight, you're going to earn that title by playing your game. Teamwork, passing. Let's show them what it means to play the Grads.
The Edmonton Grads were champions for 25 years. The record of 502 wins and only 20 losses is unmatched in all of sport.
Canadian Justice is a show about some of the most interesting and controversial legal cases in Canada. Canadians really need to be concerned with protecting our fundamental freedoms.
We need to see our members of Parliament show solidarity.
Other people who targeted us were able to amplify their voices.
I hope that this program gets people thinking about how legal issues can impact their everyday life.
This is fundamentally discriminatory.
We are relational beings, we are spiritual beings, we're social beings.
And remember, a freer Canada starts with you.
You must be the reporter. Come with me.
So, Miss McGill,
How does it feel being Canada's famous women engineer?
The real story is the work we've done retooling this factory.
To build the Hawker Hurricane?
Indeed. 40 planes last month with a capacity of up to 100. Our fighters are over England as we speak. Of course, it pains me to see airplanes mass-produced like boxcars or baby carriages. But in war, we make concessions in favor of innovation.
You must feel at home, though, managing all of these women.
I'm not here to manage women.
Well, you must admit it is an unusual job.
I'm the chief engineer here. I do what engineers do. That's all.
What are we doing now?
We are to win this war. We need to know how she flies.
Elsie McGill was the world's first female aeronautical engineer. She oversaw Canada's production of Hawker Hurricanes during the Second World War, earning her the nickname Queen of the Hurricanes.
Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm the host, Tony Clement, here at the Canada Strong and Free Networking Conference on behalf of the News Forum. And we have with us Ginny Roth, who is chairing a session on the future of the Federation. So tell us a little bit about how you're preparing for the session. What do you see as the big issues for our country?
Sure.
Right now?
So we did the session earlier this morning, and in preparation, I really tried to think about what are the fault lines in our country. They're regional, and certainly historically they've been regional. And if you look at the people on the panel, Preston Manning, Mike Harris, they have really direct experience with that, with Quebec almost leaving the country and Western alienation. So I wanted to talk about that, but I also wanted to push them to talk about newer fault lines, working class and the elites, the trucker convoy and all the people who felt that we handled COVID badly, and people who didn't. And so we that's what we got into. We really tried to talk a bit about the history, but also try to talk about what kind of fault lines and divisions are going to define Canada going forward.
Yeah, because it's not like the usual constitution meetings of the 70s and into the 80s. So give us a sense of the gist of that. Obviously populism has become the word du jour in terms of many countries, not just Canada, but in the US, UK, Germany, and so on. Is that a kind of defining characteristic of the debate in our country now?
I think it is. And populism really just means that people feel like they don't have a say, I think, in their government, in big decisions, in the institutions that are running their lives, and they want more of a say. And there's a bit of a groundswell. And I think there's no doubt that that's happening. It's happening. We saw it happen in a big way in the UK over Brexit. We saw it happen in the US with the election of Donald Trump. And I think in Canada, you're starting to see, in our polite way, the early versions of that manifesting, whether it's the trucker convoy that rolled into Ottawa, or just people protesting across the country for a variety of reasons. And now I think layer on to that the cost of living challenge related to inflation. You've got people who are not able to afford meat in the grocery store, who are making choices about the groceries they buy. And I think there are people who have been insulated from that, whose stocks have done well, whose investments have done well. Actually, inflation has benefited them in some cases. So the division in those people's experiences of what's going on in the country is very stark. And I think that the former group, the people who are struggling to be able to afford to get by and who feel beaten down by COVID, we have got to listen to them, or I think we're in for a rude awakening.
Last question, how is our political class reacting to that, and where do you see this in terms of the federal conservative leadership, but also the future of the Liberal Party?
Sure. I think the government has failed miserably in listening to people. I mean, the Prime Minister basically had his deplorables moment that Hillary Clinton had, where he talked to people who were hesitant about getting vaccinated or concerned about the restrictions and said they've got they're a fringe minority. That is just not the way to talk to your fellow Canadians, and I think it is going to hurt him politically. Fortunately for people like me and you, Conservatives, we have a leadership race, and we have strong candidates arguing in some cases, but also agreeing in other cases about how to confront that and how to be a real contrast to Justin Trudeau. I think Pierre Poilievre in particular, I'm biased, is really speaking to and connecting with people who have felt ignored by the system for a number of years now. So I'm optimistic.
Very interesting conversations being held at this conference and in the future as well. Ginny Roth, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.